Morning, Broncos fans. This is Legends of Mile High, and I'm Thomas Hall. And just a minute while I'm adding the streams, trying to do this on my own today. So bear with me just a moment. Trying to figure this out. And we'll see if that worked. I don't know if it did. Okay, I think I did it. All right, well, welcome to the show, Legends of Mile High. Today, we are going to talk about Tom Nalen and other Hall of Fame nominees, but Tom Nalen in particular. What is his? Why does he belong in the Hall of Fame? And a lot of people don't think about offensive linemen or centers that often, but Tom Nalen is a remarkable player, and he didn't get enough credit during his time. And I'm also going to say, I was just in Las Vegas on a family vacation, so I got back last night, so I'm a little bit tired. So if my brain's not working great this morning, you understand why. It was a fun time. I was there for 4 days. It was wonderful, but yeah, it was a long drive back. So I'm just going to jump in here and say good morning to Jeremy Sean. Good morning, Thomas. Good morning to you. I appreciate that. Thank you for showing up this morning. I hope you're going to enjoy me talking about Tom Nalen today. I'm also not going to do the Mile High Legend today, so I apologize. Got in too late to really ride it up, but next week that will definitely happen. Also, a couple announcements to make. Obviously, we've got the meet and greet this weekend, this Sunday at the 49ers game, prime time. We're going to do our Mile High Huddle tent. Come out there. I'm going to be there. A bunch of the other podcasters are going to be there. So, come out, say hi. It'll be great. We'll have a good time. And Jeremy, the original Tom, terrific. Yeah, he's terrific in my book for sure. So thank you for that, Jeremy. Alden Fish coming in. Good morning, Thomas. Enjoy your shows. Well, thank you for coming in this morning. I appreciate it. I enjoy doing it as well. So thank you for the comment, and we'll jump right into it. So when you are thinking about the Hall of Fame and a lot of the Broncos, sometimes you have to kind of think differently. So when you think about Tom Nalen, think about every time that you have seen an award come to a player and you just kind of scratch your head and said that he doesn't deserve that award, right? And it's happened. I mean, the voters are pretty good. They get it right. But think about all the times that an All Pro was given to a player or MVP or Pro Bowl or something, and you just like scratched your head and said, that doesn't fit. That's not right. And when you think about it that way, you have to look at Tom Nalen's career. So in 1998, it was only his fourth year in the league, really only his, early on in his starting career. That year was when Terrell Davis had probably arguably the best 2,000-yard club career, if you're talking about yards and touchdowns and lack of fumbles. It was an amazing season. That year, the Broncos also had the number 2 offense, 14-2. They just rolled over everybody, probably the best rushing attack in the league. He didn't even get a second team All-Pro. They just kind of overlooked him that year. They gave it to DeMarty Dawson, which, I mean, DeMarty Dawson's a great center. He was winding down his career, and name recognition from Pittsburgh, East Coast. That team, that Pittsburgh Steelers team that year was not very good. Their offense was, I think, 27th, 28th in the league. Jerome Bettis cracked up maybe 1,100 yards that year. It was just no. There was absolutely no reason to really say, "Oh, DeMarty Dawson deserves that award this year." So Tom Nalen missed out on that award early on for the All-Pro, and then the next year, 1999, he got a second team All-Pro, and I think it was because they they were like, well, we kind of messed it up the year before. But anyway, that has a domino effect. So Tom Nalen ended up with 2 first-team All-Pro awards in his career. But if he got that 1998 award, he probably would have got a first-team All-Pro in 99. He probably would have ended up with 4 or 5 first-team All-Pros because his name was out there early. And, it's a shame that when voters don't take the time to put in the effort to really do the research, and they just like, oh, DeMar Dawson, he's a great center. Let's give it to him this year. So there's that. The other thing that you have to think about, too, is Tom Nalen is the only really Hall of Fame caliber center who had to compete with another Hall of Famer who's at the center position for his entire career, and another one who's in the Hall of Fame for half of his career. There's only one first-team All-Pro award that goes out. He had to compete with DeMar Dawson for half of his career and Kevin Mawai for his full career. He's the only one to do it. If you look at the centers of the past that are in the Hall of Fame, you start with Otto. He was getting first-team All-Pros, and then his career started to wind down, and then it was Langier, and then it was Mike Webster, and then it was Dwight Stevenson. So they all kind of had their handle on those first-team All-Pro awards without a lot of competition, and there was some fill-ins in between there of centers who really aren't getting nominated for the Hall of Fame. But Tom Nalen didn't have that luxury. So you need to, when you think about a lot of these voters for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, they put a lot of emphasis on All-Pro awards and things like that. But with Tom Nalen, you can't do that because, as I lined out, it was tough sledding for him to get those All-Pro awards, and he kind of got what I would say he got set back from that early on award. So he only ended up with 2 first-team All-Pro awards. So when you think about Tom Nalen, you have to think about what happened on the field, for one. And number 2, you have to think about the remarkable events that occurred during his time playing for the Denver Broncos. So I'll talk about what happened with him on the field. So number 1, he only has 1 peer in the Hall of Fame because there's only 2 centers who are the leaders of a line who had 10 1,000-yard rushers and 1 2,000-yard rushers. Tom Nalen, Kevin Mawai. Kevin Mawai is in the Hall of Fame. And Tom Nalen didn't have the luxury of having Curtis Martin for 7 seasons, I believe, nor did he have Chris Johnson for 2 seasons or whatever Kevin Mawai had. He was with these Hall of Fame Chris Johnson's a Hall of Fame caliber. I mean, I think injuries cut his career short. He may not get in, but definitely Hall of Fame caliber running back. Tom Nalen had to do it with only 4 years of Terrell Davis. Then he had Alandis Gary. He had Mike Anderson, who I like, was a good running back, but definitely not a Hall of Famer. Reuben Jones, all these no-name running backs. He did have Clinton Portis for a couple of years, but he was traded away right away. So you have to think about that. Kevin Mawai's in the Hall of Fame. He's been in there for about 4 years, and they played at the exact same time, exact same era, exact same position, leading the line back when the centers were making all the calls. The quarterback wasn't making the line calls like they do a lot now. It was a different era. So he's only got 1 peer, and that peer is in the Hall of Fame. Nobody else, no other center did that. No other center in the Hall of Fame was able to have that type of production from the running back position. And Terrell Davis is in the Hall of Fame because, well, it's playoffs, and because Tom Nalen was able to lead that line in a way that allowed Terrell Davis to excel and become the running back he was. I'm just going to stop here for a second. Just jump in. Jeremy Sean's jumping in. Cool. See you Sunday. Just a reminder. Thank you for that, Jeremy. Just want to say, yeah, we are going to be there on Sunday. There's going to be a bunch of the podcasters from Mile High Huddle there. So jump in, come say hi. I think we're going to be there between 3 and just before kickoff. So the tent, Lot D, big Mile High Huddle tent. You'll see it. We were there last year. It went pretty well for the Jets game. So hopefully we can have even a bigger turnout this year. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting. Come shoot the breeze, talk Broncos, whatever you want. It'll be great. Yeah. Lot D. Thank you. Thank you, Scott, for putting that up there. I appreciate it. All right. So the next thing we have to talk about is remarkable events. So if you think about remarkable events and why people are in the Hall of Fame, I tend to think about Joe Namath, right? If you look at Joe Namath, his career stats are not extraordinary or anything. I mean, and his wins and losses, he's a 500 quarterback. There's no, you can't really point to Joe Namath's career as a whole and say, wow, that he just was way better than everybody else. However, there's two reasons I think that he's in the Hall of Fame. Number one, he guaranteed victory in the Super Bowl and he went out and he backed it up. That was huge. And in doing so, he brought legitimacy to the American Football League back when they thought the AFL couldn't really compete with the NFL. So that was huge. And he was the first 4,000 yard passer in a season. Those two things really put him over the top. And I mean, it's Joe Namath, a big name, remarkable events, right? And those are the reasons why he's in the Hall of Fame. It's not his career stats. It's not, how what he really did all the time on the field. It was those things that he did that people remember. Same with Lynn Swann. I mean, his career receiving yards aren't that great, but he's on every highlight reel still today that shows somebody catching a pass in the NFL. It's Lynn Swann is almost always in that highlight reel. Plus, he won 4 Super Bowls. So you've got to factor in these remarkable events. Well, let's talk about the remarkable events for Tom Nalen. I already said, he has one PR, the 2,000 yard, 10,000 yard, 1,000 yard seasons for a running back. That's remarkable in and of itself. But the other thing, he's went to the Super Bowl twice and won it, right? Back-to-back Super Bowls on some great teams on an iconic offensive line. They didn't say anything. They didn't boast about themselves. They didn't go out talking. I mean, Alex Gibbs asked them to just let the play do the talking, and they followed that. They hardly ever spoke, only when they had to with the media. So they weren't out there promoting themselves. That orange hush is what was called because they didn't say anything. That line is one of the most iconic lines and one of the greatest lines of all time. I mean, you look at any of these lists that people go out there and say, oh, what are the best lines of all time? That 1997, 1998 line is going to land in there. But you also have to think that the changes on that line and the production that still happened. So in 97, it was Hall of Famer Gary Zimmerman. You had Tony Jones on the other side, Mark Schleth, who is nominated also for the Hall of Fame, which I think he's a deserving candidate as well. And then you had Brian Habib. Then the next year, Brian Habib was gone. Gary Zimmerman retired. You had Harry Swain and Dan Neal, two not Hall of Famers by any means. And they even got better. They had a better offensive line as far as rushing goes. And then over the years, all those other players left. Tom Nalen was the mainstay on that offensive line. I mean, you have people that you don't even remember, that people can't remember on that line, right? That it was only Tom Nalen. So in 2000, in the early 2000s, Schleth was gone, Zimmerman was gone, Tony Jones was gone. All these other players and were off that line, that iconic line. And Tom Nalen was still leading that line, right? Still making the calls, still setting up the timing, and he was the mainstay of it all. So that's very remarkable. I'm going to jump in here and grab Jeremy Shawn again. Also, as an offensive lineman, doing your job well means not mentioning your name. He got lost in the shuffle on a big name offense that included Elway, Terrell Davis, Rod Smith, and Shannon Sharp. Yes, he did. But they did that for a reason, right? Alex Gibbs said, don't talk. Let's go out and make our play do the talking. And everybody jumped on board, and they were incredible. I mean, I remember after they won the Super Bowl and they went on to a talk show, and everybody was like, wow, I can't believe they're actually on a talk show. They went on, I can't even remember which one it was, but it was amazing to see. And even then they weren't, I think they had like the backup David Diaz-Infante or something was doing most of the talking. So it was strange, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the only time that you hear an offensive lineman's name is when they get called for holding or a false start or something like that. So absolutely. And all those other people you mentioned, Elway, Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharp in the Hall of Fame. Rod Smith's nominated for the Hall of Fame this year again. He's a deserving candidate as well. So, yeah, you get the skill player positions taking all the credit and getting all the recognition, but that line was remarkable. An iconic named Orange Hush line. Like it's something that voters should take a look at and say, wow, that is that's something remarkable in and of itself. Michael Ronquillo coming in. Good morning, Thomas Hall, Legends of Mile High, Broncos Country. Let's ride. Good morning, Michael. I appreciate. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for being a loyal supporter of the show. And don't forget, if you're going to be in the Denver area, come out to the tent on Sunday, Mile High Huddle tent, and say hi to the folks that are podcasters. Any who knows? There's probably writers going to be there too. Maybe just come out, say hi. It's fun. All right. Now, it wasn't just the iconic line that was so remarkable about Tom Nalen, right? It was what he was able to do for other running backs who weren't. I mean, I think some Denver Broncos fans remember their names, but I always look at Orlandis Gary, right? 4 games into the season, Terrell Davis gets hurt in 1999, done for the season. Orlandis Gary steps in and goes for over 1,000 yards. And it was a 4th-round pick. Nobody saw it coming. And that was kind of the launching pad for these 1,000-yard, churning out 1,000-yard seasons. And when Orlandis Gary got traded and to Detroit Lions, like he didn't even he was kind of worthless. I mean, I remember the coach coming out saying he was playing like a ham sandwich, which is not, means not very good. And so he couldn't reproduce that rushing season because he didn't have someone like Tom Nalen, in this zone blocking scheme to help make him a better player. Tatum Bell, Mike Anderson, all these people that Denver Broncos remember them, fans remember them maybe, but most of the rest of the NFL world probably wouldn't know that name if you said it out loud. The other thing that is remarkable besides the back-to-back seasons is that Terrell Davis is in the Hall of Fame because of his playoff rushing. I mean, Terrell Davis is the greatest playoff running back of all time. I mean, just look at his stats. It's incredible in his playoff run, with straight, 7 straight 100-yard games, MVP of the Super Bowl. That was made possible by Tom Nalen in that line. That's an amazing feat to happen in, when everybody knew that they were going to run the ball. And that's what's crazy. And they went into that first Super Bowl, huge underdogs, and they paved the way. And if you watch that, I mean, it was an offensive line clinic that they put on with the Green Bay Packers. Reggie White, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest defensive linemen of all time, I think had maybe one tackle. That was it. And then you watch Tom Nalen pushing around Gilbert Brown, getting to the second level. It was a clinic that they put on. An incredible performance by that offensive line. Those are remarkable events that you have to take into account when you can't look at awards, which I talked about earlier. You can't look at the All-Pro awards and just say, oh, well, that's, we'll just put him in the Hall of Fame because they have 3 All-Pro awards, first-team All-Pro. Kim Moore had 3 first-team All-Pros. He didn't get his 3rd one until after Tom Nalen retired, the year after he retired. So, which is funny because it was a year that Chris Johnson got his 2,000-yard season. They gave it to him, and they should have given the first-team All-Pro to Tom Nalen in 1998 for a better 2,000-yard season. All right. Jeremy Shawn back in. Asked not only TD, but Mike Anderson, Tatum Bell, Clinton Portis, and Reuben Jones. Absolutely. I mean, Portis is the only other running back in that group that performed anywhere else, really. I mean, Reuben Jones had a 1,000-yard season with the Cleveland Browns. He was a pretty decent running back. Mike Anderson, I mean, I loved how he played. He was a tough runner. But the line is what made those players that much better. Clinton Portis is, if he'd have stayed in Denver, he probably had a Hall of Fame Hall of Fame career. He already is already in the conversation for the Hall of Fame, but if he'd have stayed in that zone blocking scheme, he probably would have been in the Hall of Fame. But you got Champ Bailey instead, traded Clinton Portis for Champ Bailey and a second round pick, which ended up being Tana Bell, who got 1,000 yards in this system. So, I mean, that was one of the biggest steals of the Broncos drafts of all time. I mean, I can't believe it still happened, but it's kind of it was remarkable that it was allowed to even happen. So it was Champ Bailey, one of the greatest cornerbacks of all time. Dom, thank you for coming in. Good morning, Thomas Scott in Broncos country, Denver Broncos for life. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming in today. I'm trying to run the show myself because I want to make sure I got it down. In case Scott has to be out for any reason. So it's a little choppy this morning, but I'll get better at it. So thanks for bearing with me. Come back in, Dom. Portis and all the bells were the best. Yeah, they were. Portis was great running back. I mean, his 2 seasons with the Broncos are a couple of the best seasons. I mean, you got Terrell Davis, his 2 big years, and you got Armstrong back in 1974, and then you got the Portis years. So those are some of the best seasons ever by Broncos running backs. So I do think Portis was a good running. So I don't want to make it sound like it was just a bunch of nobodies that came in, but it was only 2 years that Tom Nalen had Clinton Portis, and only 4 with Terrell Davis. And so that's why I'm kind of comparing him to Kevin Y, who had Curtis Martin for, I think, like 7 seasons, and then Chris Johnson's for a few years as well. So I think Kevin Y got Lendell White to 1,000 yards, which is a remarkable feat. It was only 1,000-yard season, but he also had Travis Henry, who churned out 1,000-yard seasons as well. So I think when I'm talking about the center and how great a center is and comparing it, Tom Nalen, to his only peer, Tom Nalen did more with less than what Kevin Y did. And Kevin Y is in the Hall of Fame. And he played in New York, where, all eyes are on him. Most of the voters are on the East Coast. He was, and then he went to Tennessee. So he started in Seattle, but then, it was only a few years. And then he was in the Big Apple, where a lot of voters reside. They watch that player, and I'm not taking anything away from Kevin Y, but if he's in the Hall of Fame, Tom Nalen should be in there as well. Is all I'm saying. Okay, so the last remarkable thing about Tom Nalen I want to talk about, and the reason why the kind of final piece that the voters should be thinking about is the zone blocking scheme. Mike Shanahan, Alex Gibbs, they implemented that zone blocking scheme. I mean, Alex Gibbs kind of is what I'd call the godfather of that. I mean, it was kind of they were trying it before, but they implemented it, which they should get recognition for that. But it's the players that made it happen, right? And Tom Nalen was the leader of the line that made that happen. And the zone blocking scheme is still a mainstay in the offense. I mean, the Broncos are still running it right now with the Nathaniel Hackett, the wide zone scheme, all those principles. And they've also tried to, limit its effectiveness over the years by creating rules here and there that, from back then that they could do, they can't do anymore. But it's still, I mean, that history and that ability to do something so well that it is a mainstay in offenses today is a remarkable event that the voters should pay close attention to. It's not just some passing fancy like the run and shoot or, other offensive schemes that have happened that aren't, that are no longer around. This thing's still going on. And that's because of the Denver Broncos and because of that line and Tom Nalen being in the center of it all for so many years. That is a remarkable event. Those are the reasons Tom Nalen should be in the Hall of Fame. And if the voters can't see that, they're blind. They need to do a little bit more research and not just pay attention to the awards. Tom Nalen is deserving for the Hall of Fame. In fact, after Gradishar, he's my second biggest snub for the Hall of Fame. He's deserving. Probably could argue he's one of the best centers of all time, at least top 5 in my mind. Okay, let's jump back into the chat here. Michael, thank you for coming back in. I'm positive the Broncos will have more NFL Hall of Famers in the future. Absolutely, for sure. They're going to get more in there. I mean, Gradishar has been waiting too long. He got this season. I can't believe that he didn't get in. I mean, that was an agenda job in my mind by a single voter that kept him out to put somebody else in. But the next two, there's three. We got six more Hall of Fame openings. So for the senior candidates, I think he's definitely going to get in the next 2 years. If he doesn't, I mean, I think the NFL should riot or something because it's ridiculous. But I am working. I'm going to work hard to get Tom Nalen in. In fact, I forgot to bring it up here, but I designed a hoodie that has Tom Nalen 66 Hall worthy, and I'm going to put those up for sale on Bonfire to hopefully raise money for charity and to help get Tom Nalen into the Hall of Fame. So maybe I'll bring it next time and show up. But I mean, the whole point of it is to get his name out there, to get people thinking about Tom Nalen and understand why he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And if we aren't collectively doing that, it's a little bit harder to get people in. But there needs to be a groundswell. There needs to be some effort put into it to make sure that the voters are thinking about Tom Nalen. All right, Clayton Huron. Morning. Smash that like button and share. Let's ride Broncos country. Thank you. Absolutely. I forgot to say that. Sometimes I do, but yeah, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to Mile High Huddle YouTube so that you get these alerts. We like to talk about history on the show a lot. That's what this is about. We talk current events, history. There's some great shows that Mile High Huddle puts on, all from a different perspective. And I'm a big Hall of Fame guy, and so I talk Hall of Fame a lot, and that's what we're doing this morning. Really jumping into Tom Nalen's career, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope that you think about Tom Nalen in a different light. Start talking about him. You can get him out on social media, things like that. We all kind of can band together and hopefully get Tom Nalen into the Hall of Fame. Jeremy Sean, I remember fondly Tom wearing out the big Gilbert Brown Super Bowl against the Packers. Brown probably had 75 pounds on him. I would say, yeah, absolutely. Tom Nalen was listed at 286. A lot of times people would think that he maybe was around 275. Sometimes he was small, best technician when it comes to the center of all time. In fact, I saw Olin Kreutz, who's a Hall of Fame candidate as well, center, said he would put Tom Nalen's tape on so he could learn to be a better center. I mean, people aren't doing that unless you're technically sound. And that's what he did to Gilbert Brown. I actually think he might have had 100 pounds on Tom Nalen in that game, because Gilbert Brown was very large. And Tom Nalen gave up 30, 40, 50 pounds every game to most of the defensive tackles because of his size, and he would go out and win. And it was just he put on a clinic that game. I've gone back and watched that Super Bowl a few times, and just watching him move Gilbert Brown and watching him get to the second level was just a masterful performance. And that's why Terrell Davis was the MVP. And it could have been, it was obviously Terrell Davis should have won MVP for his performance. It was amazing. But you got Tony Jones, Steve Atwater, both were candidates. And then after that, I think Tom Nalen, if it wasn't for those other four, you could have given it to Tom Nalen, but for his performance as well. So that was big. I mean, nobody gave them a chance against that huge defensive line, and they pushed him around. So yeah, thank you for that. So Tom Nalen, definitely deserving. So we've got a few other names that I'm just going to mention before we wrap up the show. Rod Smith is nominated. He's another player who doesn't get enough credit for what he did. I think that the reason why he's not getting more buzz is because he's an undrafted free agent, and not because people don't know his name because of that, but he took time to really get playing time. It took a while for him to get playing time. Had he been a draft pick, even like a fifth round or fourth round, he probably would have got on the field sooner and started getting those stats. I think had he been an actual draft pick, you would probably see 1,000 and 1,300 for him. 1,000 reception, 13,000 yards receiving, which would put him one of the top statistical producing wide receivers for the time. So I think that hurt his candidacy because his stats just aren't where they should be to really impress people. But there was a 2-year period in the early 2000s where he was the best wide receiver in the game. If you look at his performances in a run first offense, how well he did, and that's with Terrell Owens, that's with Randy Moss. They were still in the some incredible receivers still in the league, and Rod Smith was arguably the best for a couple of years in the early 2000s. So he's definitely, I mean, that's what you have to look at, I think, for the Hall of Fame. Were they ever the best at what they did at any time? I mean, that's one of my philosophies when I'm thinking about Hall of Famers. I mean, there's people that are going to go in the Hall of Fame first ballot. There's no question. But when you start to think about, are they deserving? You have to ask yourself, were they ever the best ever? So when I think of Hines Ward, he keeps getting his name called for, the Hall of Fame. He made semifinalists. He was never the best receiver in the league in his entire career. In fact, he was never the best during his time in the AFC, and he may have been the second best in his own division. So why is he getting all this buzz? Well, he's a Pittsburgh Steeler. Rod Smith, you can point to certain things in his career and say, for 2 years, he was the best wide receiver in the game when there were other great wide receivers. So you got to think about those things as well. And when I see Hines Ward, people saying his name and getting pushed into the Hall of Fame, I just scratch my head and say, I can't believe it. I mean, it's a Pittsburgh Steeler job for sure, because he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. He was never the best. People have to start saying, oh, well, he's the great blocker. Well, that's not, I mean, yeah, if you're pointing to other things like he's a great blocker to try and say, oh, that's why he deserves the Hall of Fame, then, you know that you've got a candidate that probably isn't worthy. Rod Smith was a great blocker too, but you don't have to mention that he was a great blocker to try and convince people to be in the Hall of Fame. All you have to do is say he was the greatest wide receiver for a 2-year period, and look at his, stats for being an undrafted free agent and 2 Super Bowls and other things like that. And, he's a candidate for sure. It's the dirtiest blocker in the game. Yeah. Hines Ward was, he was a pretty dirty player in my opinion. Best crackback blocker. I'm assuming you're referring to Rod Smith on that. Yeah, Rod Smith he doesn't get enough credit for how him and Ed McCaffrey were probably two of the best blockers in the game from a wide receiver position. And I'm telling you, without that blocking, Terrell Davis and those other running backs would not have had the career they did, because that was a must in the Broncos offense under Mike Shanahan. Wide receivers that had to block. If you couldn't block, you didn't play that much. So that's just the way it is. Mark Schleth is another one. I think, he's one of those guys. He was a Bronco. I kind of think he's deserving because he's been on 2 of the best offensive lines of all time. The Hogs in Washington. He was, a great blocker on that line. And then another iconic line, like I was talking about with Tom Nalen, Orange Hush, great. And he won 3 Super Bowls. So, I mean, I think he gets overlooked a lot, but I think he's, people need to look back at Schleth again and just say, man, we need to reevaluate his ability, and what he did in both of those lines, and maybe give him another crack at the Hall of Fame for sure. He gets nominated here and there, not often as he should, but yeah, he deserves some more thought for sure. Michael, Ed McCaffrey was one of the best blocker wide receivers for the Broncos. Yes, he was. I mean, he and Rod Smith were both very good, but that highlight of him, tattooing the Green Bay linebacker in that Super Bowl it's always, anytime you watch that Super Bowl, that's on there. It was amazing, great block, and he gets a lot of recognition for that, but both of them were very, very good. A couple more names I'm going to mention before I wrap up the show that are nominated. So Al Wilson is another nominee for the Hall of Fame. I think he's a borderline candidate. If you look at his career, it was short, but very, very good. But it's hard for me to say he's a huge snub, but he definitely he has some credentials, obviously, to be nominated. I think if his career hadn't been cut short with that neck injury, maybe he has a little bit more buzz going for him. But I doubt he gets in the Hall of Fame. But he keeps getting nominated, or he got nominated this year at least. At least we can start talking about him, and I loved watching him play. He was great, but yeah, he's a borderline candidate for me. We'll see if he gets in. I doubt it. And then the next name is Jason Elam. I mean, what an incredible career for him. He's the leading scorer for the Broncos. One of the greatest kickers. He tied the record for longest field goal back in the day, 63 yards. My feeling is on special teamers, they're not out there all the time. They don't. Yes, they affect the game for sure. I mean, special teams is a third unit. They should get some recognition, but they're not out there playing all the time. And if they're not one or two or top three of the best to ever play the position, it's kind of tough to get them in. I think Elam, maybe deserves it, but he wasn't the best kicker of all time. And it's going to be a long wait for him if he ever gets in. I don't know. I keep going back and forth on it. I like him as because he's a Bronco, but is he deserving of the Hall of Fame? I don't know. He's nominated. I'm glad he's there. And then there's a couple others that played for the Broncos. Wes Welker, he's nominated. Got Neil Smith came over to the Broncos for those 2 Super Bowls. And then Dre Bly, who, I mean, I don't think he deserves to even be nominated, but he's on there. Someone nominated him, so that's good. He played for the Broncos for a little bit. I just remember him getting beat pretty badly when he played for the Broncos. So maybe his career in Detroit was a lot better and deserves it. But yeah, I don't know. To me, I think Welker may be the most deserving of those 3 that kind of had a little bit of a career with the Broncos. But I don't think Neil Smith might be the only one that gets in, which is kind of strange. I think, I like Neil Smith coming over to the Broncos too, but he was key for that first Super Bowl, but he was kind of a afterthought in that second Super Bowl run. He wasn't a big contributor the next time around. But we'll see. I think if Neil Smith is going to get in, you gotta say, well, Leslie O'Neal, some of these others should get in first. So I'm not just a complete Broncos homer and want them all in. I'm trying to be really kind of critical of who should get in, but Tom Nalen, definitely. Dave Glassman, thank you for coming in from Facebook. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. I'm just going to go back to Brian Williams. Still not sure what happened. Yeah, that block with Ed McCaffrey. He'd got a penalty now for doing it because he pointed at him after he knocked him down. But I mean, come on, they're having fun. Let them have fun. That's my as long as you're not being a total jerk about it, you deserve it. You deserve to get pointed at. That you get knocked down by a wide receiver. So, Jeremy Sean's got a great point here. Welker was that guy kind of invented the shifty slot guy as a main weapon. Yeah, he did. The thing that is probably going to keep him out maybe is that he couldn't get those Super Bowls. He had a shot, but never quite got it. So, I don't know. He did pass Rod Smith for most receptions by an undrafted player, but Rod Smith has more touchdowns and yardage. But so if either one of them get in, it'll be I'll have my fingers crossed. But I highly doubt either one of them actually get into the Hall of Fame. I just don't think it'll happen, especially as more and more of these stats keep piling up for receivers as we watch the NFL just keep getting to be a more passing league. They just get pushed down farther down the list, and the next thing you know, they're going to be like Lionel Taylor, who's forgotten about, who should have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago for what he was able to do early in his career. So we'll see. Colin Wood, thank you for coming in with a comment. We used to have an identity: Orange Crush, Elway, Manning. Now we're just a collection of guys. Well, that's kind of true. It's been that way for the last few years. I mean, if you think about our identity, as a fan watching the Broncos, it takes special players to kind of create that identity. And that's why Champ Bailey is really on the Mount Rushmore of Broncos, in my opinion, because he was that gap of really Hall of Fame caliber player that people could identify with. and from Elway and Rod Smith when they were kind of leaving, and then waiting till Peyton Manning got here, he was really that. He was the only big name that I could really think of that point to and say it was Champ Bailey that kind of got that, like you said, that identity. But I think we're gonna see that to come around. I mean, I know the first 2 games this year have been pretty underwhelming, but I think they'll get it together. You're gonna have. I mean, you got Justin Simmons. Once he comes back, you've got Russell Wilson. Those are some big names, but Javonte Williams is a player who fans can really get behind because he runs so angry and so hard to bring down. I think you're going to start to see an identity come back to this team. It has been 6 years of mediocrity, and that's a big part of it. So once winning starts happening, you're going to see that start to come back, and we'll start to see people point to this player, that player, maybe a name will come out. Who knows? I don't know what's going to happen, but give it some time. Nathaniel Hackett's definitely going through growing pains. He's had a rough start, I'll say, but I think once the wins start to happen, and I think they will, I think, unless they're just awful in the red zone, like they've showed the last two games, you'll start to see some scoring, start to see some wins, more wins coming in, and then you'll start to see identity with certain players. And that Cortland Sutton's another one who I think deserves recognition. I mean, I love the way he plays. He's aggressive. He goes after the ball. So you'll start to see these players, and then maybe an identity. And obviously, if the Broncos are able to win a Super Bowl, that narrative will be gone. They're just a collection of guys. So, give it time. Just like Jeremy Shawn said right here, give it time. Those things take time, and it does. It does. But consider the fact that the Broncos. I'm talking about Tom Nalen here. They didn't get their identity till a couple years. I mean, it was a new offense, new coach. I mean, you had John Elway, obviously, but that line was just starting to get into sync. 1995, they went 8-8. 96, they had that meltdown at Jacksonville, and then 97, 98, they were world champions. So I don't think the Broncos are going to go 8-8 unless this continues. And if it continues like this, then the Broncos front office needs to consider a different coach, because the talent that's on this team to be kind of squandered with a coach that doesn't get it for the whole season, that's rough. So like I said, let's give it time. I think Russell Wilson, his first game, he had a pretty good game. Second game wasn't very good. So they'll get it together. They didn't play preseason, a lot of new stuff going on. But if they play this Sunday like they've been playing, that's going to be a pretty rough outing. I'm going to be there live. I hope it doesn't happen. So anyway, but remember, one more time I announce it. Mile High Huddle. We're all going to be, not all of us, but most of us are going to be at the tailgating, Lot D, from 3:00 just before the game, before kickoff. Come check it out. Come meet some of the podcasters. There's some good ones out there, fun people to be with. So come check us out next Sunday if you're going to be around. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to wrap up the show. So thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you coming, listening to me drone on about Tom Nalen and his candidacy for the Hall of Fame. Let's get his name out there. He's in my mind one of the greatest centers of all time. So thank you very much. This is Legends of Mile High. I'm Thomas Hall. Join me next Friday. I'm here every Friday. We'll see what we have to talk about next week. But thanks again for joining. I appreciate it. Have a great day, Broncos fans.